Welcome to another episode of the Straight Up Chicago Investor Podcast. I'm Tom Shellcross. With me, as always, is Mark Ainley. Mark, you were laughing over there already. We're 4 seconds in.
I was laughing for two reasons. One, people always assume that you don't do that naturally. That's a recording every time you come in. But for those of you keep doubting that, we record that intro separately every single time. So a lot of people always ask me if that's just recording. But you got a new camera today, and I'm laughing because it just looks so pretty. Like I don't know, like everything. It's a little shinier. The pictures in the background. Your microphone's a little more funny. But it looks good, man.
Nice. Yeah, no, thanks to Lance for dropping it off, our helper behind the scenes here.
Yeah, no, Lance dropped me off a camera too, and he went to hook it up, and I didn't know the passcode to add new equipment. We took all of our computers here at GC, and we made sure that people just can't. We went through the issue 5-6 years ago where people just download and upload and all this stuff onto their computers, and all of a sudden their computers are crashing. But then we stopped letting people do that, and now I can't even get into my own company on my own. I can't even add stuff. So I'll definitely have my camera up and running for next time.
All right, we'll be crystal clear together.
Yeah, no, Lance is really pushing better quality everything. So we appreciate him helping us get to this next segment of the history of Straight Up Chicago Investor. So
good stuff.
What's new in your world? What you work on? You work on that. What's your ETA? You're building a coach house from the ground up. What's your ETA? How long is that going to take from like time you got the plans to the time somebody moves in?
It's weird. So the way it works is, picture like a 4-unit building, legal 3, non-conforming garden. We first have to get the garden legalized, and we can do it by right because it's R5, right? So we first have to do that. So we're going through that process now. So like the top 3 units are framed, or we are framing, I should say. And the basement's just dug out, waiting for that permit to get approved where we can finish that as well and pour the concrete. Once that is legalized, then we can apply for the ADU for the 5th unit, which would be the coach house. We can't do that before the 4th unit is legalized by right, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. So that's long. That's long. So
it's long, but man, it's even now, like you got to run water service out, or you got to run the water out there. We're looking to do likely just all electric, so we don't have to run the gas out there. With ADU, I believe it's 700 square feet, 750 square feet. Plus there's like setbacks. So ours is even smaller. So like there's only, you can't build like this awesome 3-bed, 2-bath. You're building on top of a garage, right? So like you need to, like, you can't eliminate parking spaces that were there. So like you have to deal with the doors there and heating, and like I don't know, there's a lot of just little nuances that go with it.
Now with it being all electric,
for now though, it's your personal parking space when you and I go down to Wrigley together.
Yeah, it's great when you let me park there, and then I didn't realize how little Spanish I knew or how little English your workers knew at that day when I walked over there. I was trying to park and explain to them who I was. What for you said all electric you're gonna do for you should make it all electric. Are you gonna use that? I always mess this up. It's 3 initials, like that new system where it almost looks like a hotel. It sits on top of your wall, and the other unit's all electric. It sits outside it. Are you going to use that type of heating system? What's that called?
Most likely not. I mean, just old school baseboard, probably. Like, I don't know. We'll get to that. We'll cross that bridge when we get there.
I can't think of that. What that's called, FOC or something like that. I know we manage some of those now, and it's got me interested in it's a great way to approach the boiler buildings that don't have the duct systems and so forth in it, if you're going to go put an AC in and heat.
Yeah. So all the little nuances we're figuring out over there, but it's a good one.
Nice.
So how about you? We got a housing provider tip?
We do. I'm excited to get this episode going. So today's housing provider tip, bad bricks, fences, chimney crumbling, bad landscaping, railings missing. All of those things attract negative attention, whether it be the alderman or it be the city, or maybe you're trying to hold your tenant just to the lease, or maybe your tenant's not paying and you're giving a 5-day and they call through in 1. All those things will not look good for you in the image of the city. If the city comes out, or if somebody from the city drives by, or where I see a lot of people get in trouble is the inspector might be going to your building to approve your permits, but then they see a chimney crumbling next door, and all of a sudden they get violations when they're leaving your place. So when you're standing there on the street, look at your property and make sure that at first glance there's nothing that catches somebody's eye to make them look a second time. So I always try to tell people, try to tenant proof it so you don't got to worry about someone calling 301. And then two, make sure that you're not catching anyone's eye that you don't want to be catching their eye on. Plus, it's just some good way to approach for if you're trying to market your property or lease it out or make a nice place to live.
Yeah, just attract the right people, right? You want the place to be.
Yeah, I think so. A lot of people, and I did this early on in my career too, is you just do whatever you can to get somebody in there. Maybe you don't have enough money to do all the capex, or maybe you keep pushing off the capex that you should be doing. But those things will end up coming back and biting you tenfold. Either more capex, or you have to deal with a whole bunch of BS and still have to do the capex.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, our guest today, Mark. This is all you.
Yeah, no, today's got something excited about because anytime we have somebody that started their career before the Great Recession, I think has a lot of value to offer our guests. So today's guest, he's been around doing real estate since 2001. He's done everything locally. He's done stuff across the country. He's done rehabs. He's done new builds. He's a lender, and he has a wealth of information that we'll go through as we walk through his experience here today. So without further ado, I want to introduce Mike Facchini. Mike, did I say your name wrong?
It's perfect. Well, in America, it's Facchini, and in the old country, it's Facchini.
I say usually we ask to confirm that before we go, and I'm like, oh no, I didn't confirm. I'm like, I could deal with an Italian accent where if I mess it up, it doesn't matter, or I could just go for it American wise. So I actually thought about like doing it anyway.
No, you nailed it. Facchini's the right way here. Yeah. That's what I go by.
I think you have such an awesome advantage over so many people because one, you have so many areas of specialty, but two, you originally went to school and got a psychology major, if I remember correctly. Like, tell us like how you ended up. What made you say like I want to do that?
Yeah. So it's 2000, 2001, and the job market's starting to really get bad, and I was going to school for psychology, really digging consumer psychology. I wanted to get into advertising, right? Why do people buy certain things, and how does their brain work when they see or hear certain things, and what words evoke what? And so I'm digging all this, and we had some friends in the city, friends of the family that were working at some really big advertising firms, and more I'm learning about it, I'm like, wow, I'm going to be, not really in that sexy role for a good decade or so. Meanwhile, real estate's blowing up. The mortgage industry's blowing up. I take an internship with a mortgage company, and I'm thinking, this is not for me, but I'll get some credit for it. And I decided to take this internship. I figured I'd be around a bunch of people with some calculators and, it'd be boring. And it was really fun and exciting. And it was during the heyday of when things were going crazy and people were making like crazy money and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, what is going on? Right. I'm some college student. So while the rest of the job market's falling, we've got real estate and the mortgage industry starting to hit their boom. And so I said to myself, let's just do this for a year or two, see where it goes. Certainly I can learn some stuff, right? I realized then that real estate was important no matter what I do in life. So I jumped in for a year or two, and then, 23 years later, here I am.
Well, tell me about that. I love, like I said in the intro, I love people that were around before. I hear people often, like now, 2023, say, "Oh, the good old days, 2018 or 2019." Like it's funny, like they don't realize the chaos or the craziness. Like, give us kind of an insight of what that called a pre-recession was like in the world, or there's just so many things that people just can't believe that were happening back then. That give us from your point.
Yeah. So I'm an assistant, making a small salary, and just started to pick it up quickly. And within a year, I'm like, I'm going to go out on my own, go 100% commission, start building my own book. But it was such a wild ride back then, and things were happening so quickly that was a possibility for me as a young 22, 23-year-old. And back then, now there's 3 or 4 hands, 3 to 4 times the amount of hands that hit a file. Back then, it was a loan officer and a processor and a closer, and you're getting a loan done and you're cruising through. And I mean, you guys have heard the loan.
Yeah, you're probably calling the appraiser, right? Like directly.
Oh yeah.
Calling the appraiser directly, being like, yeah, this is the value we're looking for. Now, I wasn't necessarily, I'll be honest, I'm supposed to say this, but truly I was not peddling those kinds of loans. I just didn't have the clientele that needed 110% leverage. But there were 103% loans, no income verification. You needed a pulse, right? That's really all you needed. Back then, people were coming in for an appointment. You're doing everything on paper. You're printing it on a laser printer. You're bringing it over. They're signing. You're spending an hour and a half, 2 hours with someone. They're bringing all their documents. You're making all these copies. You're hole punching those copies, putting it into a physical folder, right? You're building this file. They weren't out shopping 3,000 lenders. It was you and maybe one other person. And you're getting the deal done and you're moving to closing. And like 30 days was fast then. Now we're closing in 10 days. So that's just the way the world was. And the programs were just getting looser and looser. So as we got to 2004, 2005, 2006, there were more of those, let's call them subprime lenders, or those alt-A subprime lenders that were putting stuff out there that were higher leverage, lower documentation, and not just giving you 100% financing, but also giving you another 3% or more on top of that to cover your closing costs or to go to Vegas, whatever, right?
Yep.
So crazy stuff going on. And a lot of that was going around, I think, more so at other companies than mine or for me personally. But it was fishy that it even existed. And you start to think like, oh my gosh, how much further is this going to go? Well, then 07, 08 comes around and there's just too much inventory, right? The opposite's going on right now. The biggest issue right now is we have no inventory. You got buyer population continuing to grow year upon year. So there's more and more people in the buyer pool, and there's less and less inventory of homes. There's the exact opposite then. You had so many homes available, couldn't even keep up with it. And then once, the footing of the financial industry kind of fell out, and you had Wall Street and everybody else kind of struggling, and it was all unveiled that a lot of these securities and collateralized debts were an issue.
They would give anybody loans, and I'll admit I benefited from some of that, but I would literally buy like $120,000 property, walk away. I'd structure it where I walked away with a $10,000 check to be the first down payments for whatever rehab I was working on. Like I would literally try to structure as much as I could suck out of that. Now they'll let you get that out there, get as much, they'd make you put it towards principal if there's too much to credits. But
yeah.
The other thing about that is, we look at this leasing market right now, like how crazy it is right now, leasing the last couple of years. You couldn't lease anything for the life of you in 2005, 6, 7, because it was actually cheaper for people and easier for people to go buy a house than it was to get approved. And they had to bring more with a first month's rent, down payment, and security deposit than they had to for buying a house. It was crazy.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, it was a crazy time. And then 2008 hit hard, and I don't think we were surprised though. So
Mike, walk us through though, like 90% of the lenders quit at this point, right? That's a tough time, terrible time to be lending. And you're young, like why didn't you pivot? Why did you suck it up and stick it out?
That's a great question. So first off, I was single, no kids, and I'll tell you one thing I learned from an early age. I got into the real world with maybe $1,500 to my name. I had to figure it all out myself. And so I was frugal. And I had a bunch of clients. Some were spending money wisely and some were not. And I was learning from both of them. So by the time this all went down, I had money saved up, plenty of money to weather the storm. I wasn't out like most lenders buying their new Mercedes and doing the lavish trips. I was still cheap as could be, right? So even when I started making money, much more than most of my friends, I was frugal. And for whatever reason, I'm like, yeah, this is bloody. I didn't think about getting into anything else because I was still digging what I was doing. I had some investment properties going. I was also cleaning a lot of stuff up. So at that point, not only was I in lending, but I was running a collateralized debt fund or a private equity fund where we were taking money in and effectively providing bridge loans on the commercial side, residential side. And so, whereas we were providing short-term financing a year or two to investors and whatnot, by 2009 or so, we had a lot of them handing their keys over to us, right? So like, I can't make payments on this anymore. So we went from being a lender effectively. This is separate from what I was doing on the residential side, helping people buy homes. This is a private equity fund I was running. I was now getting, I was managing a portfolio of real estate, right? Some of it was somewhat performing and some of it wasn't. We had tenants across the country losing their jobs and, having to evict them, and they were taking copper and appliances with them when we would evict them. And so it got Blake. So I was so busy just cleaning and doing whatever I had to do that I guess it just wasn't a thought to jump ship.
Taking it.
I knew there was an end to it too. I was like, can't be like this forever, right?
Taking a step back though, you went from being successful just doing the residential mortgages to the to doing the bridge loans, like the private equity stuff. Like how'd that decision come? Was it I'm being so good here and I got this other opportunity? Like, talk to me about the mindset of a shift when things are actually going pretty good for you in one field. Cause I know a lot of people get like, oh, it's so going so good here, I'm going to expand and this is it. Like, talk to me about that train of thought.
Yeah. So what we were doing wasn't far much of a departure from what I was doing day to day. So day to day, I was helping people buy single families and multi-units, more on the residential side, dabbling a little bit in commercial, brokering out some commercial stuff. So I had my lane that I was in, and then I had people coming to me looking to get financing short term, willing to pay whatever, right? Because there was meat on the bone for them. I didn't have great solutions. So I started to do some small deals here and there with a partner of mine. We pooled our money together. I had some cash, he had some cash. So we loaned this person that, loaned this person that. And it worked out. So like, wait a minute, should we be doing, this is around 2006. Should we be doing more of this? So then we put this private equity fund together. And it was going great for a while. And then 2008, 2009 happened, and we had to, clamp down really hard. And we took over a bunch of properties. Some we made something out of, and some were a disaster, right? So I spent several years thereafter as a property manager, effectively cleaning up a mess.
Let's talk about the mess. That sounds fun. All right, so give us the squatter story. You're probably getting these for just to be clear for everyone listening, like you're probably getting these at a very good basis, right? If you're the lender on it, which is great, but you're also dealing with the headache. So talk to us a little about, all right, we got squatters in here, family in here, it's destroyed. Like give us some of those, I don't want to say horror, but give us something here that'll make us giggle.
Yeah. Also, what was your LTV to like these? Like, you're taking them back. Like, were you? Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that too. How much in the hole you were?
You're trying to keep these below 80 LTV, and if you went above it, you were collateralizing. Maybe they had a brokerage account, or they had another property you cross collateralized against. So you really had some skin in the game. So part of it was psychological, right? Like this one project that they had, they wouldn't let that go because it was tied to other stuff that had equity in it. So, we had situations where, like Philadelphia, we had 15 units or so, multifamily, a whole bunch of squatters.
And you're flying out there, like you have to go take care of this?
No, we were dealing remotely. We had boots on the ground for us. So never went to that property in person, but we had our property managers and what. And during that time, property managers are trying to figure it out too, and they have a lot on their plate. I'm sure Mark can probably empathize a bit, where it's like, man, it was caving in on everyone, right? And
I accidentally became a property manager during that time. Like, that was like it was, all these problems fell in my hand. Similar to you, I just kept running with it. Like after the recession, it's like, oh shit, we have 300 units and we don't got a process in place. It's like, it was like total accident because all the chaos.
Yeah, you just had to figure it out.
Yeah.
We in this building, there were squatters everywhere, and they were pulling in friends. And before we knew it, we had like homeless people living in there and just trashing the place. We had them stealing, like I said, copper out of the walls, appliances. We had a property in Manhattan where it had a ton of equity, and we had a tenant who just wouldn't leave. And the tough part about Manhattan is it's rent controlled effectively, right? So this guy's living in this one unit for, I'm trying to remember, guys, I think it was like $600-700 a month, right?
Manhattan.
So low. so low. And we're like, here's $30,000. He's Greek. We're like, go move to Greece and retire. And he wouldn't move, right? So, I mean, just situations where like there's no end in sight. How are we going to get out of this one? And yeah. And then we had good situations too, where people were good human beings and they're like, here you go. We can't handle these payments. See you later. But most people were malicious, right? You're dealing with their home.
You were single, so you didn't have that problem. Or at least I think you're single at the time. You were under 30, so you're a little ignorant to kind of how bad this really is. Like, to talk to me about kind of like like when the crash started, like I had no clue what the hell I was doing. I did a lot of stuff and it just kind of happened. But like the 42-year-old version of me would be like, holy shit, like be a lot more aware.
Mm-hmm.
Like tell me about kind of what was going through your mind during that time.
I think, yeah, a bit naive, but also I've always fallen back on this principle. No matter what the new and trendy investment is out there, at the end of the day, people always need a roof over their head. And they always need a place to put their stuff, whether it's a company, if it's Amazon, they need storage or they need warehouses. If it's a human being, just needs a residence. So I was like, yeah, this is bad, but at some point it's got to work its way through because you can't let the whole real estate market fail. It just can't happen. Perhaps I was naive, but to this day, that simple fact has rang true. So it's worked out for me.
I remember, I think I realized how bad it was when I actually bought a handful of properties in 2009 and I had them free and clear. And I'm like, oh, anyone will give me money. And it took me like 12 points and a 12.9 1 year like note secured by my first child to make me realize like, oh shit, this stuff is bad right now.
You always know where the economy is going based on what lenders are starting to do. They foreshadow where the economy is going. And like this year is a good example. Credit's tightening, right? It just means the economy is restricting. So while certain economic data is going to suggest we're still in a super healthy economy, in my experience, the last 20 some years, we've always, the mortgage industry or lending has always preceded what's to follow.
What I remember up until like 2008, you go to like a conference and you see these economists, like, I mean, they're like up, like all the way up to 2008 when things are crashing in California. So be careful where you get your advice from when it comes to economists. No offense, economists, but what did you take away like from, all right, so, for the last 4 or 5 years, we've been talking about, are we going to be a recession? A lot of people having conversations. Like, to me, it doesn't look like money's tightened up. And I feel there's all this private equity out there. There's these private lenders. There's a whole new like Renovo and all these called middle tier type lenders out there for investors. I don't see it tightening up. Maybe give you some insight, kind of what now looks like compared to back then, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you could say on one hand, there's plenty of money out there. And on the other hand, money is tightening up. So people are still spending. Let's just look at individuals. People are still spending, but do they really have this money? I don't think they do. I think a lot of people, especially the middle class, right? There's such a divide in wealth now. I think the middle class is running out of money. And we're going to start to see that coming up here. And the Fed's trying to make things expensive, but you're seeing lenders in general just being a little more strict. There's a lot of layers in my industry. There's a lot of smart people and big institutions behind us that make decisions, and that trickles down eventually. We're already seeing that, is what I'm telling you. So when the various institutions behind us are tightening, that means it's coming. So, and money's more expensive too, right? So that has an effect on all of us. Even private equity's tightening. People are just not throwing money at any deal. They're looking for the cherry deals right now.
So let's switch a little bit from the lending perspective to you as an investor, right? Because you have properties yourself. What you just laid out there, how is that affecting your decision making today? Are you still out there walking properties? Are you still looking to grow your portfolio?
Absolutely, yeah. So going back to that private equity fund, the whole concept of that was we were going to lend money to people who had something of value, and typically they were assets that were performing and could perform very quickly, right? So there's a lot of like multi-unit. So worst case scenario, we foreclose on something that at least is bringing in some rent, right? And then we can figure it out from there. So that's where my comfort has always been. If I can have an asset that has revenue stream, I can make it through whatever kind of economy we're going to face. I personally feel that, multifamily is a great place to be. I'm not doing a whole lot on the commercial side. I don't want to get into retail, office, anything like that. Just apartments. And Mark hinted at this before. People are fighting over apartments right now. I think it's going to get even more competitive, not just for buyers, but for renters in the next few years, just based off of data. The population of millennial, or the amount of households that are splitting in the next few years, right? So people graduating from college, they're living at home. They're either about to graduate or they graduated a year or two ago. They're living at home. All that's going to be coming to an end. They're going to be moving out. There's roommates, 3 roommates living together. One of them gets a girlfriend. He's got to move out. So we need more roofs over our head than ever before. So for me, it's like, yeah, these assets are more expensive than what I can stomach as a lender, because I look at appraisals all day and I'm like, oh man, you can't rationalize these prices, but I know where things are going. So I've got to bite the bullet and spend that extra 5 or 10% more than I'm comfortable and own this long term. Because at the end of the day, I preach this to my clients all the time. Everyone's looking for a deal. Good luck. There's not a whole bunch of steals out there on assets, unless you're willing to put a bunch of blood, sweat, and tears into it. But if you're trying to find something that's pretty stabilized in a good, area, and it's going to attract good tenants, you're going to pay for it. You're not going to be able to negotiate. There's no clearance sales right now. And I'm just going to have to hold it long term. But that's how I'm looking at everything. I'm going to hold things for 20, 30, 40 years, or maybe give it to my kids.
Yeah, I love it. I love that mindset. Where do you mind sharing? Where are you looking at properties? Like where in the Chicagoland area, where in the burbs, like just throw out some of the areas that you're putting your money to work.
Yeah. So I think, 20 years later, this is where I'm at. I don't know that everyone listening, has to take this advice, but I've owned across the country, and I've owned during the hardest times when, like I said, tenants get mean and ugly and they steal from you. And so do property managers, right? So like I've had property managers in different markets and they just weren't good people. And so now me personally, because I'm a control freak, I want to be able to drive to it. I've got to be able to drive to it. So I've sold everything except for Chicago. I do live in the city. I do work in the city. And while the city's got its challenges, it's what I've known and loved forever. And the properties I have here are doing very well. So my focus is on the city. And I'm typically looking at A neighborhoods because I'm willing to spend more to get more. That's one thing I preach about, right? So I'm willing to buy a property that I'm not inheriting a ton of deferred maintenance on unless I am bargaining for that, right? So as we shared before, I've done big rehabs. I've done new construction. I'm capable of doing that depending on my bandwidth, right? So how busy am I in life? I have a 5-month-old right now. I just bought a building in Wicker Park, and I quantified what amount of work I had to do to it and what would be necessary over the next year. I didn't want a lot of work over the next year because I want to be with my baby boy. But that's not to say in like 2 or 3 years, I would be taking on some bigger projects. So right now I'm looking for like A neighborhoods, good tenants. I'm going for slow and steady personally. I'm willing to put more money down to make the numbers work. I'm managing all the stuff myself. I'll mention that, probably to the point where I probably need to get a property manager, but that's the control freak in me that I've managed the stuff up until now. And I've got a nice portfolio that I could probably hand over and then start focusing on bigger stuff. So, but I would say, Wicker Park, Lincoln Park, Lakeview, those are the neighborhoods that I've been focusing on.
There's a couple things I want to unpack there. Because you always hear, you mentioned it, but we don't really ever talk about what those are. Like you said, city's got its problems or its issues, whatever. But for me, from a management standpoint, I feel to own a property in the city, let's say 2 flat or 3 or flat or 2 or 4 flat, it's not that hard. I think there's two times it gets hard. One, you have to evict somebody. So either A, don't buy with tenants, or don't put a shitty tenant there. I think so that you could hedge your risk there. And then two, I think the other part is if you have to get permits, plans, and that. So you either A, make sure you front load your time to get a project done so you're good for the next decade or two, or don't buy something that needs that much work. So I think you take those two things, and maybe I'm missing something, but I want to make sure that we cover that, because we never really talk about that. It's not that hard to be a landlord. You can complain about taxes, but taxes aren't that bad in Chicago either compared to the suburbs for a 2 to 4 unit. You complain about the CRLTO, but it's around 40 years and there's plenty of workarounds. So I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts?
I'll jump in. I agree wholeheartedly. There's also just something about the 2 to 4 unit. It's just easier. Like even like take a 4 unit I have versus 6 unit, like things just change, right? They treat it as like a home. They got the formal dining room. Like it's a different tenant base, and they, you can almost pay one of them to cut the lawn for, less than you do your landscaper. And like, it's almost like a single family where it's like hands off. I don't want to make it sound super easy, but when you compare it to the 6 unit, the 9 unit, the 12 unit, there is just this easy factor to it for, I don't know. That's because I play in both spaces, and that's what we've seen across our portfolio. The other thing I would just add to your list, Mark, would be if you max out, like, hey, I used all my liquidity, and then you have CapEx, right? Real estate works, but you personally can get caught, whether it be through a flip, through a rehab. Like you don't have the money to put into the building, and you need to do that to keep the building pumping. And it might suck for a year, it might suck for 2 years, but you got to do it because the long-term benefits. Like that's another way you just get caught. You run out of money.
But that's going to happen anywhere. It's going to happen in the suburbs. It's going to happen in St. Louis. So
yeah, that's not a city. Yeah, correct. I guess maybe it's a little bit more because you got a bunch of 19, 20-year-old buildings. So maybe that chance is a little bit higher.
Maybe age,
but that's not Chicago specific. It's just another way you get burned.
So older property, yeah, no, older properties could, because like I said in the front, you underestimate your CapEx, or that side of the building you never really look at. Didn't realize you need $30,000 in tuck pointing. Those things do creep up.
I agree with you guys, though. I think I've always had tenants fighting over my units because they're in desirable areas. I usually rent $100 or $200 below what I probably could get. I give them a little bit of ownership in the sense of, hey, this is your place, treat it with love, be a good steward. You want a garden? Cool. I'll buy the plants, you do the gardening. You want to paint? Cool. I'll pay for the paint, right? So I think you find that with the 2 to 4 unit property, you get a little more of that. And, taxes are high. They're the same in the suburbs. But our cost of real estate here compared to most major cities is very reasonable. And you put that compared to a person's income, there's a lot of earning potential. There's a lot of opportunity in Chicago. If you talk to people that have lived in other mid-sized cities, there's a ton of opportunity here. Yet the rent is more expensive, but it's not substantially more expensive. They can cover that extra $400 or $500 because they have the job opportunity here. So I never have a problem getting tenants. To Mark's point, you get the right tenants. I've had a couple evictions in my many years. I've had a handful of vacancies, months worth of vacancies across all my properties, because I've been very intentional about who I put into those units. I'm looking for good people. I actually meet them. I have to at least Zoom with them, if not meet them. I want to know who's going to be living there. And it's worth my time, even though I'm super busy, because they might stay for 2 or 3 or 4 years. I just had a tenant that moved out, was there for 7 years, and they were fixing things around the apartment. So that's the kind of stuff I'm looking for. If I can have those kinds of people, it's great. And I find quite a bit of that in the city. Now, you can have a flip side where you're just placing people trying to get top dollar, and they're going to use and abuse your space. And that's not what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I think that backfires. I just want to make sure we bring that up. Like your concept, I see a lot of self-managers do that a lot of times. There's a mindset of ease of management if you're just below market, right? The $100 maybe below market, but it's not even always ease of management. There's a lot of benefits there. One, you're going to probably get it rented a week or two faster, which now if you're at $2,000 a month, you're $1,000 up ahead already on that. But the smart best tenants go for the best price, best looking units quick first. And that's why that $100 under is going to get rented faster. But then there's going to be a level of they know they're getting a good deal. So they're not going to maybe push. They're maybe not going to call an extra work order. Maybe they are going to screw that back in, or they're going to change the light bulb on the back porch for you. And then it's like, now time to renew. Like, I got a good deal here. Maybe I'm either A, they're going to be grateful for just the small bump you do, or B, they're okay with a bigger bump because they know they're already undervalued, but they're going to stick around because they know they're getting good value. So I feel there's such a financial formula to that of just being a tad bit below versus, man, usually the people that try to push the rents, you go higher, you get the crappy applications, or they just move out after a year. And then if you could keep somebody there an extra 12 months just because you started off a little lower, like that will pay for itself and turns over a 10-year period.
Yeah, treating each other well, right? Treating people well. It all comes down to that. Like, I'm good to you, you're good to me. I've gotten this question more often than ever. Like, if a pipe breaks in the middle of the night, do I contact you? Who do I contact? They just want to know that they're going to have a home, they're going to be taken care of, they're not going to have the horror story with the landlord, and let's treat each other well. And then it becomes equitable for everyone, right? So create comfort for them, be reasonable, be quick to respond. It's simple stuff. And as a lender, I know how to vet a good credit risk, right? That's what I do for a living. So I'm looking at these people, and you can smell who's full of BS and who's not. And I'm not always right, but 9 out of 10 times, hopefully I get it right and I get a good tenant that stays a long time. And that's, for me, important.
Yeah, you are a psychology major too, so you're already in everyone's mind. That's first, so I'll give you that. I want to make sure you take advantage of that. But 2, you're in a customer service business. Lending money. I mean, that's, people trust you. They have to trust you with their social, all that stuff. So you have another advantage on being a landlord, just because you have that high B, that customer service side of things.
Good point. Yeah.
But you've also done some new construction. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So I did a 4-unit a few years ago. That was an interesting one.
Well, why? This back up though. How'd you get into it? Why? Like you woke up one morning. Like tell us a little behind the scenes.
Yeah. So I started to become the multi-unit guy around Chicagoland and elsewhere. And so people were bringing me their purchases and whatnot. And then I started to develop some proprietary lending programs through my company, Fairway, which is privately held, and we can get sometimes a little more creative. So I became the multi-unit guy, and I just had, people knocking on my door from wherever. And I'm like, wow, people are finding me. And I realized there's such a marketplace for multi-units. And the issue was so much was funneling my way on the multi-unit side, but my clients were having a hard time getting their hands on property. So the idea there was, well, why don't we start creating some multi-units, right? Let's do a little experiment. So I did that right before COVID, and did fine. And would I do it again? Absolutely. In fact, I plan to, but it was just an experiment, because the idea was I have a marketplace that's coming to me for financing, but they can't find inventory. So why not just create the inventory? That's where it came from.
So it's hard for most people to comprehend what you just said. Like, I'm just going to wake up and build a building. Like, did you have somebody that knew the construction? Did you research the construction? Did you find the land? Like, how'd you do this? I guess
Yeah, great. So my business partner was a real estate agent, and so he helped. Well, he found the land, and he had construction background. I had some construction background. Not enough for us to be like, okay, we're going to be good at building a new construction 4-unit. We brought in a GC. We pulled in the right people. Just like when you're buying a home, you can be a first-time home buyer. It's the same kind of overwhelming feeling of, how do I do this? You got to piece the team together. You got your lawyer, you got your lender, your home inspector, your real estate agent, blah, blah, blah. So same concept, and had done major rehabs before. So really, it's like, honestly, guys, I did a major rehab for my own personal residence that I live in now. That was way harder than the new construction building. Because if you're starting with dirt, you just have to throw in a foundation. Yeah, you got to get your plans, and you get your permits, and you go to, community meetings and kiss a lot of rings. There's a lot of rings you kiss, right? So there's a political aspect to it, which was kind of fun, right? I'm like, all right, cool. I'm learning something new. And so that was new and exciting. But beyond that, you're putting in a foundation, you're framing it, you're throwing in all your your electrical, HVAC, and mechanical, and you're insulating, and you're off to the races. And a lot of people who have been in renovation, they come in at the drywall stage. They're comfortable with drywall in. So I don't know. I guess it wasn't as challenging as I thought it was going to be. Now, don't get me wrong, you do have to have money behind you. So we had savings, those contingency savings, right? Because nothing goes as planned, timing or budget. So if you have patience and you have enough, you really need to know how to just push. Like push. A wall is thrown up, a problem's thrown up. How do we push through that wall? That's a lot of it. But going to my single family, that was more challenging because I kind of took 3 walls and retrofitted my vision into 3 walls and a foundation that I dug down and, created more of a basement and built up, out, and down and all over. That was way more complicated because you're dealing with something that is pre-existing and trying to retrofit into it and all the problems that come with it.
Yeah, been there. It's exactly my house you were describing.
Really?
Hey, so let's go back real quick to the new construction. You talked about the community meetings. What differed from the original vision? Hey, I want to build, the units this big. I want this, that, and the other. What were some of those gives, if any, that you had to sacrifice because of the community or because of the alderman or FAR or whatever, requirements? Like, talk to us a little about just like, we thought we were going to get this and we got that.
Yeah. So context, this is in Avondale, and this, Avondale, there's a lot going on now, but you have a lot of people that have lived there for a lot of years. And so you're coming with these renderings to these community meetings and painting a picture of how you want to add to the community, right? And the way they look at it is you're just changing their neighborhood. And it was a more modern looking building. We wanted to have some balconies, right? They didn't want balconies. Like the smallest of things, I'm trying to think, where are they going to park their bikes? And silly question. I mean, you had like older people that had a lot of time on their hands that had lived in this neighborhood for 30, 40 years, and they just didn't want any change. And you have to respect that, right? We're coming in and we're about to do something that, they see as detrimental. So we had the zaniest of things thrown at us in terms of the color of the siding, even. They wanted to know everything. What's it going to look like and how much of an eyesore would it be on the neighborhood? So, yeah. Now, there were certain things that, you listen to and you have to try to make some accommodation, but ultimately there's certain things within right that you're just able to do.
Got it. Going through that process, were you surprised by how many things you had to change, or is this you going in and going, all right, like, let's see what they have to say here?
So my partner and I, on a cold, snowy Chicago night, are going door to door, meeting with people all along the streets to tell them of our plan, right? To get buy-in, which I did with my own single family. I met my neighbors, let them know I'm a good person. I have good intentions here. I'm not going to build a monolithic home. I'm going to respect some of the facade of this classic home that I'm altering. And we wanted to do the same for this building. You have to convince people of like what the vision is and let them know your intentions are pure, right? So we went through that process of kissing a lot of the community's rings. The alderman at the end of the day really didn't care as much as long as the people were happy. But I was a bit shocked by, how resistant a certain percentage of the community was to any change. They didn't want development. They didn't want prices to go up too much. They didn't want rents to be too expensive. We did do a Chicago housing unit where we provided some affordable living for one of the units out of the 4. So you made accommodations, right, to make it work.
Was all the door to door on the cold nights and all that extra time that's worth it? Like necessary to do? Like,
I think so. I mean, you asked a question before, like you just wake up one day and decide to build a 4-unit. Kind of, but then once you're in it, you're just winging it, man, trying to figure it out. And that was one of those things where like, let's hit the streets, let's go door to door and sell some knives.
I like you, Mike.
There you go.
I like it. Scrappy.
Yeah. So, yeah. And then, so like I said, it was our first time understanding the politics. That was what was new to me.
So I want to pivot real quick back to lending. So when someone comes to you and they're, hey, I want to build an ADU. Hey, I want to do this. Some of these more complex where, your traditional quote unquote lender would say, oh, I don't know. Like I'm used to doing, conventional and FHA and VA, and that's what I got for you. Talk to us a little bit about how you can help some of our listeners in that area, right? Everyone's scrounging for deals right now. Everyone's trying to make things work. And the way you make things work is putting some sweat into it, turning a 2-unit into a 3-unit, whatever it is. It usually has having to repivot these assets to make them perform.
Yeah. So you've got your simple way of doing things, finding financing that is good with what your vision is. I want to take this from a 2 to a 3-unit, or you have your scrappy way of doing things, right? So we're financing it as a 2-unit, and then you've got your own dollars to turn it into a 3-unit. And a lot of what decides the two different routes is what line of sight do we have on you being able to make it into a 3-unit, right? And so a lender on the conventional side, residential that is going to want to, almost guarantee that we're going to be able to get to that destination. Otherwise, we're lending on a 3-unit, or we're lending with the idea of a 3-unit value proposition of a 3-unit, but in the end, we end up with a 2-unit, and the lender doesn't want to back up that kind of deal. So if you're looking at a traditional renovation loan, the line of sight on increasing unit count has to be pretty clear. ADU's clearer than adding a full legalized, extra 3rd unit. So otherwise you're looking at commercial financing or hard money, which a lot of your listeners probably have dabbled with, right? So hard money is going to be kind of what I was doing back in the day on that private equity fund. We were more common sense, but you're paying for it, right? So you're putting some good money down. You're going to pay, 2-3 points up front and a double-digit interest rate. So those are the buckets, right? We've got residential, which has a little bit of gray area, and we have to have a clear line of sight and be able to get that zoning that we need, or buy it as a 2-unit and use your own funds. We can renovate the 2-unit portion and leave the basement or the attic or whatever alone, or the coach house, and then with your own funds, get us to where we need to go for that 3rd unit. Or we're talking commercial, which is going to be more flexible. But what's important in commercial is your balance sheet. So looking at your personal financial statement, do you have a lot of good assets, more so liquid than non, right? If you have a bunch of real estate owned, that's great, but do you have some rainy day funds to fall back on? And commercial likes a resume too. Who are you? What have you done in the real estate space? Have you owned multiple multi-units? Have you owned commercial before? Do you manage your properties? Do you know what you're doing, right? So if you've owned a few 2 or 3 units, that's great. That helps your resume. That's commercial world. Then hard money's like, whatever, we don't care. We just want to walk out unscathed. So we're going to make you pay handsomely for it. And we got to like the deal you're getting into. And, those are your buckets right there.
Got it. Real quick, going back to the commercial, for those who, I only own a 2-unit, I'm looking to buy my 8-unit, go ahead and beef that up. Show how you raise the rents from X to Y. Show how you increase the value. Talk about your team. Put a page together. This is my contractor. This is my agent. This is my attorney. They've done X amount of deals. Like, go ahead and beef that thing up. And it doesn't have to be you if you are early in that journey. It can be everyone around you. And we've talked about that a few times. Like, that looks, it's the right, I still did it. I still do that to this day, even when I'm going to a same lender that I've used multiple times. Like, you just show that, like, it's a level of professionalism.
Yeah, for sure. And you never get a second chance to make a first impression. So to make sure you come out the gate with that type of approach if you're going to do it.
Yeah. Everything requires a little bit of sales.
Yeah. Everything sales. when we talked, you brought up something around a program you guys have about converting buyers to cash. So I don't remember the context of it, but I figure we'll touch on that.
Yeah, our cash guarantee program is pretty awesome. So we went into how, inventory is very tight, right? And you probably have friends and colleagues who are making offers. And let's just talk specifically about primary residences. So we allow this for primaries, second home, vacation homes, as well as investment. But right now we're only doing it on 1 units. So unfortunately, I can't guarantee a 2 or 3 or 4 unit purchase. But this is helping a lot of our clients who are going out there trying to buy this $700,000 single family, and there's 4 other people bidding against them, some of which are doing 50% down or all cash, right? So how do you compete with that? So what we're doing is we're guaranteeing our clients, certain clients, so we get them fully approved in advance, and we will guarantee a purchase price up to $1 million. And we'll tell the seller, and we got an addendum that goes in the contract, so it's all legal and binding, that if the borrower has any issues in regards to financing, we will buy that property from the seller within 3 business days of the original closing date for up to $1 million in purchase price. We also have some appraisal gap coverage too. So if the appraisal comes in low, we will either buy the property from the seller at that lower price or give them $10,000 as a consolation prize for their time. And so what this is doing is allowing our typical buyer who has 5, 10, 20% down to go compete on this primary residence that a developer who's paying cash or someone who's got, wealthy parents paying cash, to compete with them. And arguably, we might even be a better buyer than a cash buyer, I will argue, because I've been in the industry long enough to know that cash buyers sometimes just walk away because the wind blows the wrong way. So yeah, that one's been, we've had to come up with something here to help our buyers because there's just not enough property out there.
Sounds like 2007 programs. No, I'm joking.
Right?
Full circle.
So far it's working out for us and we're good. We've had to exercise that guarantee a few times and pay out some appraisal gap checks and whatnot. But overall, it's allowing our clients to get under contract on properties they otherwise would not have a shot.
I love it from the marketing approach. It's Alex Rabosi. Make the offer so attractive you can't turn it down. So I love it.
Yeah. I mean, we have sellers that are taking that offer over somebody else willing to spend $5,000 more because everyone's looking for speed and certainty, right? I'm a seller, negotiating a deal with you as a buyer, I still have to go buy a place. It's nerve-wracking.
Yeah,
it's stressful.
So get in the weeds for a second here, like on the 7.0 contract, are we doing a financing contingency? Is this cash mortgage allowed? Like how is this presented? If I was the listing agent, you came to me or your client came to me, like, how is this presented?
Technically, there's no mortgage contingency except for, we're telling you, Tom, you're my buyer, Mark's the seller or the listing agent. We're saying, hey, Mark, Tom's good to go. He's been fully approved. The only thing we need to do is property specific. We have to get our homeowner's insurance policy, which is easy. We have to get title, make sure that's free and clear. We got to get that appraisal. In the instance of a condo, we have to make sure it's warrantable. It cannot be a non-warrantable condo. It needs to meet certain specifications. So all these property specific things, we check those boxes, we're good to go, right? And I talked about the appraisal gap if the value comes in low. So so we effectively have you guys approved in advance, and we're letting that seller know this is a guaranteed deal for reasons of financing. Now, if Tom, my buyer, decides during attorney review, he's nervous about these plumbing issues and wants to walk, of course, there's nothing I can do to help the seller there. But once we're out of attorney review and we're out of that side of things, we really don't have a mortgage contingency other than the appraisal, title, and those property specific items.
So a seller just basically looks at it as they're getting a cash offer and they got to get out of due diligence or attorney review no matter what the offer is, unless they waive that, which is very rare.
And the reason why I'm saying I think it's better than a cash buyer is we know enough agents out there who have had cash buyers who've canceled a day or two before closing. And they got a ton of money and they got good lawyers.
Yep.
So good luck chasing them. Whereas a large institution like us, you can come at, we're not going to walk away from that situation. We're going to do what's contractually obligated of, that we have to do. But people could come after us and get a pretty penny if we did not,
All right. Awesome. All right, Tom, you ready to wrap?
Let's do it.
All right, Mike, you ready? Scrappy Mike. We got some awesome conversation here today. I love it. I say that because I consider myself scrappy too. So I like it.
I like it.
So, all right, Mike, what's your competitive advantage? How have you been able to do all this while others wish they could?
You just do it. You get in there and you get your hands dirty, because if you're waiting for the answers, you're waiting for timing and all that kind of stuff, you're wasting a bunch of time. And a lot of what you have to do, you have to figure out yourself, right? So I have failed a whole bunch in my day. And now I'm having more successes as a result of all those failures.
Yep. If only we could go back and write the book Fail Fast, or however that book is. Like that's it, man. Just fail and keep moving.
Yeah, keep moving.
All right, Mike, what's one piece of advice you would tell someone that is yet to buy their first property here in Chicago?
I would do it right away. I think it gets worse from here. Going back to what we've been talking about here, I think inventory is going to get tighter and tighter. And we've all heard this quote. It's not about timing the market. It's a time in the market, right? So if I can buy now, competition's bad, but it's going to get worse. Let me get it before it gets worse. Yes, rates seem a little higher. By the way, rates are lower than where they were when I got in the industry, and people were refinancing like crazy back then. So, the perception is rates are high, whatever. Get into that home while you can. Next year, it's going to be even more difficult. And then you're going to refinance in a year or two and bring that cost down.
You going to say it, Tom? Your slogan? This is becoming your...
What's up?
Time is your asset. I was waiting for you to jump in there.
That's
that's
your biggest asset. Everyone wants to look at the first year cash on cash. It's like, all right, cool. That's a very important metric on this 30-year horizon.
I don't remember what it was, but someone pointed out to me the other day that there's one thing I always say, and I'm like, man, I wonder if there's something that Tom always says. And that's yours. Is time is your asset.
I like that.
All right, Mike, what do you do for fun?
I love to travel. I love going to Italy. I love snowboarding. I like to make pizza.
Are you first generation?
I'm second generation.
Nice.
Yeah.
Where are you guys from?
My dad's side's outside of Rome, and my mom's side is outside of Naples.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Give us a good book, podcast, or self-development activity that you'd recommend to our listeners.
Right now, I'm actually reading this book, which is from one of our Fairway folk. And it's during COVID, how he survived a lot of challenges. And I think a lot of it has to do with just mental strength and getting your head right. So, Thriving in the Storm, there he is, Bill Murphy. So it's a book that many probably don't know of, but really good one.
All right. Besides yourself, name one person in your local network you'd highly recommend to other investors as a quality resource.
Ooh. Man, well, let's think here. I've got a lot of real estate agents and some contractors, some attorneys. It's hard for me to narrow down to one, though, guys. I think it really depends on what people are looking for. But a lot of us have gone to this podcast. A lot of us have gone to Bigger Pockets. I think that stuff is really good to kind of get people's nerves, kind of shed some of those nerves, right? And realize that Mark, Tom, myself, we all started somewhere. You don't have to be an expert, but you do have to start to just get involved and be a sponge. And
Tom, are we letting him off the hook without giving us a name? Or are we going to...
I'll let him off the hook because he mentioned the podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, your podcast.
It's acceptable cop-out.
All right, cool.
All right, Mike, thank you so much. You provide a ton of value to our listeners. How can they learn more about you? Is there any way they can provide value to you?
You can always email me. You can visit my website. I'm happy to help. I love when people are interested and want to get involved. So if there's any events you guys need me for, I like speaking at those. But even if you're just a first-time buyer trying to figure it out, don't hesitate, right? So I'm at michaeljfacchini.com, MICHAEL, J as in Joseph, and my last name is FACCHINI.com. And if you just know good people that you're trying to connect, that are looking to buy, or if you're in the trades, I think all three of us could say, we're always looking for good contractors, right? So, yeah.
Awesome.
All right,
All
good
right.
stuff. Who we playing for the Chicago Fact?
All right, we're playing today's Chicago Facts brought to you by Essex Realty Group. So today we're playing with Beth Janko. So Beth, if myself or Mike get this question right, you'll get a $50 gift card brought to you by Essex Realty Group.
Oh, the pressure.
Yes.
Let's do it. All right.
I don't want to let Beth down.
No, we got this, Beth. So I asked this question for two reasons, because we mentioned Wicker Park. And also, Mark, you and I were recently at dinner together. You showed me a picture of you in Cancun with the frosted tips and the hookah shells. Hopefully we can post that in the show notes, but it'll tie into this question here. So there was a season of MTV's The Real World that was actually filmed in Wicker Park. Okay. Think back to when that was. What year was that? And here are your options. Was that 98, 01, 05, or 08? Mark, you get first shot at it.
01.
Mike,
what do you want to go with?
05.
Mark, you were so confident. You probably had the frosted tips watching this thing on your couch. Nice work.
Oh man, I remember that. I remember bumping into one of those guys one night at the bar. Whatever. Either way. All right, Beth. Awesome.
Story had a short.
That's a whole
short
nother
leash.
story. But Beth, you get the $50 gift card brought to you by Essex Realty Group. Mike, you didn't even get a chance to answer, so I apologize for that. But
No,
that's awesome.
That's a good one.
All right, cool. Well, Mike, thanks for coming on. Tom, thank you as always. Listeners, build your team. Even though Mike can't give us a solid referral here for someone that he recommend, we could definitely recommend a whole page of them. So visit straightupchicagoinvestor.com, click on build your team. And we have a bunch of reputable, whether it be home inspectors, contractors, we got porch guys on there. We got attorneys, we got cost seg guys. We have a whole bunch of people that me and Tom and our network have used and are reputable that you can use for your real estate journey as well too. So Mike, thank you for coming on. Tom, thank you as always. Listeners, we'll see you next week.
Thanks all.
Bye guys. Thanks for having me.